going to move to question time, and I call Senator Hume.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Senator representing the Prime Minister, Minister Wong. The Prime Minister said last night, "I was pretty upfront in December. I said we were looking at ways for cost of living pressures to be relieved." But Treasury confirmed on Monday that it was preparing work on changing the Stage 3 tax cuts from the 11th of December, and when asked about this on the 21st of December, the Prime Minister said, "Well, we've made no decisions along those lines. We're not reconsidering that position." Will you now apologise on behalf of the Prime Minister for the deliberate way in which you have misled the Australian people?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Wong.
Well, President, the second day of question time after we table in the House this important legislation and finally the coalition get close to asking a question on the tax package, but they don't actually want to ask about the content, they have to ask about timelines. It's pretty extraordinary, isn't it? Well, you know what is so interesting is that you fulminated, you used words like this was such a betrayal, a treachery, a trickery. All of these things are betrayal, and now you're voting for it. Now you're voting for it. If you really thought this was the wrong thing to do, you would vote against it and you would say you'd repeal it. You know it's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do, and the fact that you are voting for it simply proves that. Now, I watched some of Nemesis last night, and not all of it. I just watched a bit on iView and tried to fast-forward through the bits. And I have to say, one of the things that struck me was the extent to which the previous Treasurer, Treasurer... Oh, sorry.
Resume your seat? Senator McGrath, I believe that was you. I'm going to ask you to withdraw.
I withdraw.
Thank you. Please continue, Minister Wong.
You certainly tell it straight in that program, as always, Senator McGrath. But I was struck by the way in which the then Treasurer, Mr Morrison's approach to tax reform was to leak it. And there was the Prime Minister of the day and the Leader of the Government and the Senate of the day, and they had a furious row because it was leaked. You know what we did? What the Prime Minister did? The Prime Minister took it. The Treasurer took it to ERC. We dealt with it at ERC. We took it to Cabinet. We took it to caucus, and we announced it.
Your seat. Order. Order. I have Senator Hume on her feet. Senator Birmingham, I have one of your senators on her feet. Senator Hume.
Sorry, on a point of order, Madam President, the evidence that was heard on Monday was that Cabinet
Hume,
and
Senator
ERC
Hume, that is not a
were
point of order.
circumvented.
Senator
You
Hume,
broke your own
resume
rules.
your seat. Senator Hume. Senator Hume, resume your seat. Order across the chamber. Order. Senator Hume, when I ask you to resume your seat, please do so. Do not continue disorderly conduct. Minister, you've got 10 seconds.
Thank you. We followed the appropriate process. It's a pity those opposite are so unfamiliar with it.
Senator Hume, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. After clearly demonstrating that, and I quote, "We have no plans, we are not considering that," after clearly demonstrating what that actually means, that we are planning to do exactly that, how do you expect Australians to believe you when you said recently that Labor had no plans to introduce changes to negative gearing?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Wong. Minister Wong.
Thank you, Mr President. Well, I think it's interesting, isn't it? I'm asked how Australians can believe anybody. Well, how are they supposed to believe a coalition that actually is complaining about a change they're voting for? They're voting for. How are they supposed to believe that?
Order,
and how are they supposed to believe
Minister
that
Wong.
you're the party of lower
Minister
taxes?
Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Hume.
Thank you, Madam President. I specifically asked about your
Is this a
no
point of
plans to change
Senator
negative gearing.
Hume.
Negative gearing.
Senator Hume,
Sorry, point of
resume
order.
your seat. Senator Hume, when you stand, I'm presuming you're standing on a point of order. I'm not a mind reader, so you need to actually state that you're standing on a point of order, but I think you are now debating with Senator Wong. I'm going to listen carefully to the minister's response, and if there is a need to redirect, I will. Minister Wong.
Well, I'm going to put this to you. You wouldn't expect me to pull out one ingredient or one part of tax reform, so I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to play the yes, this is good, no, this is bad, the rule in, rule out. I'm not going to do that. Deputy Leader Susan Lee! Oh, dear me! Oh, dear me! Deputy Leader Susan Lee! There you go. They want us to get into the rule in, rule out, but I notice the Deputy Leader, ducking and weaving, doesn't want to rule in, rule out anyway. I mean, this lot over here, they used to be the party of lower taxes. We're the party of lower taxes. This is what the Dutton opposition has sung to.
Senator Wong. The time for answering has expired. Order in the chamber, particularly on my left. Senator Hume, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. When asked to rule out implementing a new tax on the family home, the Prime Minister said, well, that is at the bottom of the drawer. Who is ruling anything in? Now, will you now take the opportunity to categorically rule out to Australians any change to the tax on their family homes under the Albanese government?
Order. I'm not going to call the minister in. Order. Order. Order across the chamber. Senator Ruston, I've called order. Minister Wong.
You know what is in the bottom drawer, President? Pathetic recycled scare campaigns from the coalition. That's what's in the bottom drawer. And we've seen it again today. From the party that prided itself on being the party of tax cuts and lower taxes, now forced to vote for the tax cuts that we are putting forward because they know they're better. Because they know they're better. The party that used to be the party of tax cuts, now conceding the Australian Labor Party is the better party when it comes to tax policy. And the party of the scare campaign, whose deputy leader herself says, the rule in, rule out, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. You should listen to your deputy leader, Senator Hume. You should listen to your deputy leader before you're given and take questions like that for question time in the Senate.
Order. Order. Just a moment, Senator Smith. I'd like to acknowledge that former Senator David Bushby is in the chamber. I'm not sure what you think of the standard of question time, but hopefully it will improve. Welcome. So, Senator Marielle Smith.
It'll improve right now. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Can the Minister please inform the Senate how the Albanese government is helping to combat gender inequality and improve the lives of women across the country? In particular, how has the Albanese government responded to cost of living pressures, and how will delivering a tax cut to every single one of the 6.5 million hard-working women taxpayers assist?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Wong.
I thank Senator Smith for that excellent question, and I thank her and so many of my colleagues for their ongoing commitment to improving the position of working women in this country. Because we know on this side of the chamber that women's equality and financial security isn't just a nice-to-have, it's an economic and social imperative. And under our tax cuts from this year, every working woman in Australia who pays tax will get a tax cut. 6.5 million hard-working women who make so many valuable contributions to our community will pay less tax. And the vast majority, perhaps listen to this, Senator Ruston, before you interject again, the vast majority, 9 in 10, will get a bigger tax cut than under Mr Morrison's plan. 9 in 10. You see, the Labor Party, the Labor government, the Albanese Labor government wants women to earn more and to keep more of what they earn. And Treasury modelling also indicates that Labor's tax cuts will increase labour supply by twice as much as Mr Morrison's plan, driving primarily because it will drive an increase in women's participation. That's what the Albanese Labor government's tax cuts do. Treasury advice says this plan will help by enhancing the participation benefits of the tax cuts, especially for women, and distributing the future impact of bracket creep more evenly. We are a government that is already delivering positive economic outcomes for women. We are addressing the cost of living and reducing barriers to workforce participation, cheaper childcare, boosting paid parental leave, supporting economic security for single parents and ensuring women get a fair deal at work. And now we have a tax plan which ensures every Australian woman will pay less tax. Every Australian woman will pay less tax. You would have thought those opposite might be celebrating
Senator Wong.
that.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Smith, first supplementary.
Thank you. We know that women make up the majority of the workforce in so many critical professions, including our teachers, care workers in the aged sector and nurses. We also know that these hard-working women are often on lower or middle incomes. Why is it so important that these workers get a bigger tax cut under Labor's tax plan?
Minister Wong.
Thank you to Senator Smith. Thank you, President. And Senator Smith is right. We do know that so many of the workers in lower paid industries, teachers, care workers, the aged sector, nursing, are women. And we know the extent to which that drives the gender pay gap, and we know why it's so important for women and for families and for all of us, for our economies, that be remedied. Women make up 80% of our primary school teachers, nurses and care workers. These are workers who deliver for our kids, for those who are sick, those who are vulnerable, making invaluable contributions, but unfortunately we know they are likely to be in low and middle income jobs. Well, Labor's tax cuts deliver for these women. 96% of receptionists will be better off, 97% of registered nurses, 97% of aged and disability care workers, 98% of primary school teachers. This is Labor delivering for working women in this country.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Smith, second supplementary.
Minister, can you please explain why the Albanese government's plan is the right plan for these economic times and why it is backed by Treasury and economic experts?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Smith. Well, the Treasury advice is crystal clear. Labor's tax cuts are the right move. We know that cost of living pressures have disproportionately impacted low and middle income households, and we know that these tax cuts for all Australian taxpayers will help with that without adding to inflation. Now, of course, we also know it's the right thing to do because those opposite, despite the hot air, despite the dramatic language, but despite the fact that the Deputy Leader said we will fight this legislation, even though we don't know what it looks like, despite all of that, they're voting for it. They're voting for it. And they're voting for it because they know in their heart of hearts this is the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for working women. It's the right thing to do for Middle Australia. It is the right thing to do for our economy. And no amount of shouting at me is going to hide the fact that you have conceded that we are the party of lower taxes and we are the party of a better tax plan.
Senator Wong, order. Order. Order across the chamber. Senator Cash.
Thank you. And my question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Minister, can you inform the Senate how much extra in taxes Australians will pay over the next 10 years because your government broke its promise to the Australian people to implement the legislated Stage 3 tax cuts?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I welcome the opportunity to talk about Labor's tax plan. The tax plan that the opposition is now supporting, the tax plan that the opposition is now accepting, is the right thing to do, is the right policy to put in place to ensure that people are paying lower taxes and getting more money into their pockets sooner, and a fairer share of those tax cuts than they would have got under the plan of Scott Morrison from 5 years ago.
If you resume your seat. Senator Cash.
Thank you, and President. The point of order is in relation to relevance. Unless we are playing word association games in the Senate, the question was very clear. How much extra will Australians pay over the next 10 years because you have broken your promise to the Australian people?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Your question does go to tax cuts, but I will remind the Minister of the specifics of your question. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And I do have. I only had 36 seconds to lead into that question, the answer. And I'm sure the good senator has read the Treasury analysis. But under our plan, the vast majority of taxpayers will pay less tax and less tax over 10 years than they would have under the Morrison plan. And that's because ours is a better plan that gives bigger tax cuts to more Australians. 11.5 million more Australians will get taxpayers will get a bigger tax cut under our tax plan. And I know the opposition want to concentrate on what might happen in 10 years' time because they don't want to focus on what's going to happen right now.
Please resume your seat. Senator Cash.
And again, President, point of order in relation to relevance. Again, unless we are playing a word association game in the Senate, this is about the broken promise and how much more Australians will pay under your government over the next 10 years.
Thank you, Senator Cash, and I believe Minister Gallagher did go to that just prior to you standing up. Minister, please continue.
I did go to that point, and the Treasury analysis is very clear on this. I don't know how many of you read it before you decided that you would oppose it and then decide you would support our tax cuts. But that goes to exactly the question that Senator Cash asked. The vast majority will pay less over the next 10 years, and most importantly, and it also presupposes no further tax changes in the next 10 years, which, you know, we've already proven that we'll be focused on making sure that we return bracket creep and do it in a fair way that's responsible to the budget.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Cash, first supplementary.
Thank you. And over the last 2 years, on more than 100 occasions, the Prime Minister looked Australians in the eye and told them he wouldn't change tax cuts that were already locked in. He also told Australians, "My word is my bond," and he asked them to trust him. Minister, isn't it true that because the Prime Minister broke his promise to the Australian people to implement the legislated Stage 3 tax cuts, the effect of bracket creep will mean Australians will now pay an extra $28 billion in taxes over the next 10 years?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Cash for the supplementary. And I do find it interesting that the opposition are complaining and moaning so much about a policy they actually support, a policy that they have agreed is the right thing to do at the right time, the right policy, because Labor's the party of lower taxes. Labor is the party of lower taxes, and you know we got the policy settings right. And you know what? You know what Australians can trust about our Prime Minister is our Prime Minister will make the right decision on their behalf, not the convenient decision, not the easy decision, but to actually make a decision based on the national interest and the best interest of millions of Australians. And that's what you can't stand, because you know he was right, you know the plan's right, and that's why you're voting for it.
Senator Cash, second supplementary.
Minister, is $28 billion a number you will never say, just like no one on your side will ever utter the words $275 again, because that was the amount you promised Australians you would reduce their yearly power bills by before the election? Another broken promise. How can Australians ever again trust anything your government says?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Gallagher.
Well, I do find it interesting that you've got nothing, day two of this, and you're scrambling around the outside. You can't actually talk about the policy. You can't talk about the plan that we've put in place.
Senator Cash.
It's all about everything else. It's all about 10 years' time, about what might happen when a fourth-term Albanese government is making decisions. It is interesting to see that you clearly locked yourself out of governing for the next 10 years. You want to talk about something in 10 years' time? How about we talk about what's happening right now? How about we talk about what's happening on the 1st of July? How about we talk about teachers and nurses and aged care workers and truck drivers and receptionists and tradies? How about we talk about them? Because you know what happens for them on the 1st of July? Not 10 years, right now. You know what's going to happen when that bill passes is every one of those will get a bigger tax cut.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Cox.
Thank you, President. I rise to ask a question to the Minister representing the Minister for Resources, Minister Farrell. The government is currently developing its future gas strategy, which is using the gas industry's false talking points that gas is necessary as a transition fuel and firms up renewables. The science says the atmosphere cannot absorb emissions from the current fleet of coal and gas plants, let alone any new ones, without climate collapse. Why is this government using the gas industry's false talking points instead of implementing a steady phase-out of gas?
Thank you, Senator Cox. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Cox for her question. And well, I think the gas industry is perfectly correct here. Gas is a transition fuel. In a perfect world, where we know that there are serious future issues with climate change, it would be terrific if we could turn a switch and go from fossil fuels to renewable fuels. But, Senator Cox, we know that that's absolutely impossible. That's absolutely impossible. No country in the world has managed to today turn off gas and tomorrow be completely reliant on renewable fuels. Now, this government intends to be a renewable superpower. We're going to transform this economy. We're going to transform this economy. We're going to transform this economy in a way that this mob over here would never ever have even contemplated doing. But if we've got if we're going to do that, then we have to keep the lights on. We have to keep the lights on between now and when we can make that change.
Senator McKenzie.
And the fuel that we're going to do that is gas. And without gas in that intervening period, we cannot make the transition, nor Senator Cox, will we have the support of the Australian population.
Thank you,
to
Minister
do it.
Farrell. The time for answering has expired. Senator Cox, first supplement.
Thank you, President. Just last week, the Minister for Resources told a conference in Japan that Australia's gas is helping lower Japanese emissions. More fossil fuels increase emissions, and Japan's latest figures show that their emissions are up by 2%. Why is the Minister again using false talking points provided to her by the gas industry?
Thank you, Senator Cox. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Cox for her first supplementary question. Well, we're very lucky in this country, Senator Cox, to have a minister like Minister Madeleine King. She understands the resources industry like nobody else I know. And she, of course, does understand just how important it is for this country to honour all of the agreements that we have made over a period of time. There's nothing worse than a country breaching its agreements. And, of course, this government and this Minister King, has absolutely no intention of breaching any of the international agreements that we have made, whether it's with Japan or any other country.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Cox, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. The future gas strategy has solely focused on the phase out of gas, not developing plans to prop up the dying industry and help out their political donors. So when will the Minister of Resources start adopting advice from climate scientists and government agencies instead of the propaganda that's being peddled by the gas industry?
Thank you, Senator Cox. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Cox for her second supplementary question right now.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Minister. Senator Stewart.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Women, Senator Gallagher. All Australian taxpayers will get a tax cut under the Albanese Labor government's tax cut plan. That's all 13.6 million taxpayers, not just some. Minister, you have often said in this place that Australian women are at the core of the decision that this government takes. Can the Minister please explain why the Labor government's tax cut plan is better for Australian women?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Stewart for the question and for all of her advocacy around the needs of women and improving economic equality for women, particularly in the state of Victoria. Labor's tax cuts will put more money back in the pockets of Australian women. The cuts will provide cost of living relief, and it will mean that women can and are able to pick up an extra shift or an extra day of work if they want to, and then keep a larger proportion of what they earn. Labor's plan will see a tax cut for every single woman who pays tax in Australia, and our plan will see women taxpayers on average receive a tax cut of $1,649 from the 1st of July. And 9 out of 10 of those women will receive an additional average tax cut of $707 under the former plan. That's 5.8 million women receiving more than they would have. Under our tax cuts, childcare workers, disability carers, aged care workers, nurses, teachers are amongst those who will benefit the most, with more than 95% of those taxpayers to receive a bigger tax cut compared to the Morrison plan. These are also those highly feminised industries, as all of us know in this chamber, with workforces that are over 80% women. And of course they are vital industries that contribute to our economy and our quality of life. Labor's tax cuts, and the Treasury analysis shows this, will have a positive impact on women's workforce participation. As outlined in the Treasury advice, the plan is projected to support a boost of 630,000 additional hours per week worked by women. When we looked at these tax cuts, when we changed our position, we did so mindful of the impact they would have on women, because women are at the centre of government decision-making in this government and of the policy decisions that we make.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Stewart, first supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, I know that the women of Victoria are working hard. They are juggling work and family, many of them working in critical sectors that support our whole community, and they're also facing cost of living pressures. Can you outline how many women in Victoria and across the nation, more broadly, will get a bigger tax cut under Labor's tax cut plan?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Stewart for the supplementary. We can confirm that every woman taxpayer in Victoria will get a tax cut from the 1st of July. Of those, 1.5 million women, or 90%, will get a bigger tax cut than they would under the Morrison proposal. In Tasmania, every woman taxpayer, 140,000 of them, will get a tax cut, and 94% of them will get a bigger tax cut. In WA, every woman taxpayer will get a tax cut, and of those 600,000 women, 90% will get a bigger tax cut. In South Australia, 93% will get a bigger tax cut. In ACT, every single woman will get a tax cut. Of those 120,000 women, or 86%, will get a bigger tax cut. In Northern Territory, 83% will get a bigger tax cut. In New South Wales, 1.8 million women, or 88%, will get a bigger tax cut. And in Queensland, 1.2 million women, or 92%, will get a bigger tax cut.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Stewart, second supplementary.
Thank you for outlining those important statistics, Minister. Women's economic equality has been at the heart of the Albanese government's policy since day one. We can see this in the careful analysis of Labor's tax cuts and their impact on women. Can the Minister outline how these tax reform work with other Labor reforms for women?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Stewart for the supplementary. Well, as Senator Stewart knows, because she's part of the first majority woman government in this country, and I work so closely with all of my colleagues from the Status of Women Committee and more broadly, that our decision-making has been focused on driving women's economic equality, whether it be in our policies around cheaper childcare, whether it's around our modernised PPL, whether it's the work we've put into the women's safety front, whether it's implementing the Respect at Work report and all 55 recommendations. It's about transparency and accountability on the gender pay and gender pay gap. It's about making sure we address inequality where we see it, like in single parenting payment and some of those interactions. And there is more to do. But this tax plan, the Labor's lower taxes plan, will significantly improve women's interaction with the tax system and return more money to their pockets.
Has expired. Senator Roberts.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Senator Wong. Minister, what percentage of Australian greenhouse gas emissions result from agriculture in Australia?
Minister Wong.
Could you repeat that question? We missed the last sort of 15 seconds of it.
Senator Roberts, if you repeat the question, please.
Minister, what percentage of Australian greenhouse gas emissions result from agriculture in Australia?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Senator, I'm awaiting statistics as we speak, but what I can say to you, and as someone who was the Climate Change Minister, there is opportunity in agriculture to deal with climate change, and in fact, as you know, the National Farmers Federation for many years had a much more forward-leaning policy when it comes to agriculture and climate change than the Coalition. I'm advised it's in the order of 16–17%. Thank you very much, Senator Watt. To the year to June 2023, the agriculture sector was responsible for 17.7% of Australia's total annual greenhouse gas emissions. Now, modelling by ABARES shows that climate change over the last 20 years has reduced the profitability of Australian farms by an average of 23%, or around 29,200. And I recall one of the early reports I read, which made me so much more acutely aware of the risk to agriculture on climate change, was a report which the CSIRO did many, many years ago. So this is before, I think, we won government in 2007, which predicted or modelled that the Goyder line would move south of Clare. Now, if anybody's from South Australia, now I know that would be very bad news for Senator Farrell in particular, but anyone from South Australia who knows what the Mid-North is like, that is a very frightening prospect. So we do think it is important to look at how it is our food and fibre producers can best adapt to a changing climate. Many are already doing so and are obviously involved in the discussions with government about climate policy.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Roberts, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. As the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos last month, the American Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, stated that agriculture accounts for between 26 and 33% of world emissions and will account for half a degree of warming by 2050. He further stated a warming planet will grow less food, not more, and so farming needs to be a major focus of reducing human carbon dioxide production. Minister, how do you reconcile the production of food accounts for between 26 and 33% of emissions with your figure of 17.7?
Minister Wong.
Well,
order.
There's a different denominator, Mr. Senator. Obviously, one is as a percentage of Australian emissions and one is as a percentage of global emissions. I also am unclear from the context and detail of the quote you gave me whether or not Special Envoy Kerry was dealing with food production further downstream as well. I don't know, what he's referring to, but I certainly agree with what he is saying about the implications for food security. And what is also true, not only is that a substantial issue for Australia because it will affect our capacity to produce the levels of grain production we have, which is obviously very important for our economy. But the nations on whom this will fall most hard are those nations who have the least capacity to be resilient to this change. So if you look at countries like
Bangladesh— the time for
Bangladesh—
answering has expired. Senator Roberts, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. The methane cycle, soil carbon sequestration and forest carbon sequestration absorbs all Australian agricultural emissions, meaning Australian agriculture contributes nothing to global emissions. Minister, is the war on farming not about the environment and rather about creating a false scarcity of food to force the adoption of laboratory-grown food-like substances that predatory billionaires own for their profit and control?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Wong.
Senator, there's a lot in that question, but I want to just go back to the fundamental proposition. Climate change is already affecting our agricultural production now. And I read you the figures earlier, which is ABARES modelling shows that climate change over the last 20 years has reduced the profitability of Australian farms by an average of 23%, or around 29,200. No, you don't like the facts. You don't like the facts. And we know,
Minister
you
Wong,
don't like the facts.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Order on my right. Order on my right. Senator Rennick.
Of order, Chair. Models are not facts.
Senator Rennick, that's a debating point. Minister Wong, please continue.
Models are not facts.
Minister Wong, please continue. Order across the chamber.
You know, Senator Roberts, I understand your views on this. I disagree with them. And what I would say to you is this. If you go and talk to a lot of Australia's primary producers, if you go and talk to primary producers in the Pacific, or in Southeast Asia, the truth is that people are already experiencing the impact of climate change on agricultural production. And we might want to wish it away for ideological reasons, like Senator Canavan does, but it's the world—
Thank you. Order. I'm going to wait for silence. I'm going to wait. Order. Order. I'm going to call an opposition senator, so those senators interjecting are wasting her time. Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government. The Australian Automotive Dealers Association has said Labor's targets, and I quote, will be difficult to achieve, especially for utes and large SUVs, and this could have consequences for affordability and vehicle choice. Minister, will you provide a clear guarantee to the Australian people that there will be no increase in the purchase price of any model of four-wheel drive, ute or SUVs as a result of the government's new vehicle efficiency standard? Yes or no?
Thank you, Senator Mackenzie. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Mackenzie. I can actually do better than that. I can do better than giving commitments from the Albanese government about this point. What I can actually do is point you to the remarks of Mr Fletcher, who at the time was the Minister for Urban Infrastructure in May 2018, when the former government momentarily was going to introduce fuel efficiency standards. And what did he have to say about this? Well, what Mr Fletcher, a member of the Liberal Party, a minister at the time, said was that so when fuel efficiency standards were introduced in the US, the most popular models before introduction stayed the most popular models after introduction. Essentially what Americans call pickup trucks and what we'd call utes like the Chevy Silverado. There wasn't a material change in price, and we don't expect that there would be a material change in price here.
Senator Mackenzie.
Point of order on relevance, Madam President. The discussion paper release goes to cheaper cars. I am asking the government to back in Minister Bowen's claim around the cost of cars. Are they going to go up or down?
Thank you, Senator Mackenzie. I will direct the minister to your question. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. So, as I say, I can do better than directing Senator Mackenzie to a comment from this government. I can direct her to Mr Fletcher's remarks,
Senator Watt,
Minister
Watt, I have asked you to give a response to Senator Mackenzie as a government response. It's okay to refer to a previous government in passing comments, but the bulk of the question is directed to you as the minister. Senator
Point of
Watt.
order. President, on the point, I would make this point that the fact that a minister is referencing a previous minister does not mean it's not directly relevant to the topic that's being put. So I'd ask you to consider that.
Thank you, Senator Wong. I do appreciate that, which is why I gave the minister some leniency. I agree that it is reasonable to quote a previous minister, but I think the time now is to move on to Minister Watt's response.
Thank you, President. So, as I say, there is no evidence whatsoever from international experiences that prices of vehicles under a new fuel efficiency standard will increase in the way Senator McKenzie suggests. And as I say, Mr Fletcher made that point back in May 2018 when he said that when America introduced fuel efficiency standards, quote, "There wasn't a material change in price and we don't expect that there would be a material change in price here." But what we have, as expected, is the same old scare campaigns from the National Party. What we have is ending the weekend Mark II. And I noticed that Senator McKenzie went awfully close to reinventing the weekend attack when she said on Sky News on the 5th of February that Australians want the work car to be their weekend car. They had to get the word weekend in there somewhere, Pavlovian style. We're almost Scottish en masse, where we don't want a work car and a separate weekend car. We like them to be together. That's Senator McKenzie. Unfortunately for Senator McKenzie, Senator Sharma was on Sky News the same day,
Thank you,
and we'll
Minister.
get to that shortly.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator McKenzie, first supplementary.
The Australian Automobile Association and the Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries have expressed doubts over the government's modelling on the impacts of its carbon emission policies for SUVs, four-wheel drives and utes, and has called for the government to release its modelling. The government paid ACIL Allen almost $750,000 of taxpayers' money to undertake that modelling. Minister, when will the government release the full taxpayer-funded modelling for public scrutiny on this?
Thank you, Senator McKenzie. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator McKenzie. Well, Senator McKenzie may not yet have taken the opportunity to read the 80 pages of analysis in the analysis statement that was released by Ministers Bowen and King just the other day, and I encourage her to do so because she'll probably find a lot of answers to the questions she asked in there. Now, Senator McKenzie does refer to some statements made by some stakeholders who are opposed to this, but I've also noted comments from the RACQ, the NRMA and a range of other groups who are backing what the government is doing here. But it's not only stakeholders who are backing what the governments who are doing here, because as I say, we don't want to hear what your own people are saying, do we?
Senator McKenzie, before I come to you, I will remind you to stand, and then when I call you, tell me you have a point of order, but you've said you've got a point of order, so please go ahead.
On relevance, Senator Watt asked if I'd read the document. I have.
Senator McKenzie.
And it references this report and this modelling, and they haven't released it.
Order.
When will you release
it?
Order.
Senator McKenzie, you rose on a point of order and then you went immediately to a debating point. I called you to order. You didn't come to order, and I repeatedly had to call you. That is disorderly. There is no point of order. The minister is being relevant. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. As I say, it's not only stakeholders like the RACQ and NRMA and many others who are supporting us. Senator Sharma made an early appearance in his new career as a senator on Sky News on the 5th of February 2024, and he said, and I quote, "Well, we are adopting increasing fuel efficiency standards, and that's a good thing. I don't have a problem with that. We should be doing that, and the fleet should be progressively getting cleaner and lower intensity of emissions." Good on you, Senator Sharma. You know the right thing.
Order. Order. Senator Thorpe. Order. You are. Senator McKenzie still has a second supplementary, then I'll come to you. Order. Order. Senator McKenzie, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. The Motor Trades Association of Australia says that there, and I quote, "no internal combustion engines that can hit the government's 2029 carbon targets." Based on the government's own Green Vehicle Guide, the proposed carbon penalties for popular SUVs such as $1,500 per Toyota RAV4, $6,600 per Mazda CX-5, over $7,000 per Hyundai Tucson by 2027. Minister, can you guarantee that there'll be no
Senator
reduction
McKenzie,
in availability
your
of
time
these
for
top-selling
asking the
cars
question
for
has
Australians?
expired. Minister Watt. Order. Order. Senator Wong and Senator McKenzie. Order. Order. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator McKenzie. We are aware that there are some particular stakeholders who don't support what we're doing because they like things as they currently stand. But as I say, the NRMA is supporting what we're doing, the RACQ is supporting what we're doing, the RACWA is doing what we're doing, as is Senator Sharma is supporting what we're doing. So thank you, Senator Sharma, for your support. And I'd encourage Senator McKenzie and all of her National Party colleagues who want to go on about ending weekends that there's another country not too far from here that's a little bit similar to Australia, which likes its utes, which likes its pickup trucks, which likes driving long distances. It's called the United States of America. And you know what? They've had fuel efficiency standards in place
Senator
for 50 years.
McKenzie.
And the last time I watched a movie in America, there was a pickup truck in that movie, because there are lots of pickup trucks in America, despite having fuel efficiency standards. That is exactly what will happen here, at the same time as providing cost of living relief to Australians by reducing petrol prices. Why do you want regional Australians to keep paying more for their petrol rather than what we're proposing now?
Thank you, Minister Watt. Order across the chamber. Order. Senator Thorpe.
Thank you, President. My question is for the Minister representing the Attorney-General, Minister Watt. We are in a black deaths in custody crisis, with 558 deaths since the 1991 Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody. Since coming into government, the Albanese government has implemented just one recommendation from the Royal Commission: a live body bag count of our people coming out of prisons. Shame. One recommendation in 2 years. Minister, my question is, what's the next recommendation this government is going to implement?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Thorpe, for this question about a very important topic. You would be aware, Senator Thorpe, because I think you've asked similar questions about this before, that the Albanese government has been taking action in the time that we've been in government on these issues and on the issue of First Nations justice needs more generally. More than 30 years on from the Royal Commission, deaths in custody do continue to have a devastating impact on First Nations families and communities. And while states and territories hold most of the levers, the Albanese government is playing a leadership role in tackling this issue. We know that the key
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
Relevance. My question was, what's the next recommendation this government is going to implement?
And Senator Thorpe, there was not a long preamble, but there was a reference to black deaths in custody and recommendations which the minister is also entitled to go to. But I'll listen carefully, and if he doesn't fully address your question, I'll draw him to the question. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President. So, as I say, the Albanese government does recognise that there is unfinished business when it comes to implementing the recommendations of the Royal Commission, more than 30 years on from when it handed down its report. And we know that the key to addressing what is a national shame, it is a national shame, the rate of deaths in custody amongst First Nations people. We know that the key to doing that, reducing that rate, is reducing the rate at which First Nations people enter the criminal justice system in the first place. And that's why we're investing in up to 30 community-led justice reinvestment initiatives across Australia.
Senator Thorpe.
Relevance. My question is, what is the next recommendation you're going to do?
Senator Thorpe, the minister is being relevant to your question. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President. So, as we are continuing work on those recommendations from the Royal Commission, we are taking other action as well in the First Nations justice space, like investing in up to 30 community-led justice reinvestment initiatives across Australia and establishing an independent National Justice Reinvestment Unit, as recommended by the Australian Law Reform Commission. The Attorney-General has also announced 9 communities that were successful in the first round of Justice Reinvestment grants. And Senator Thorpe, as I'm sure you're aware, they were in Cowra in New South Wales, Maningrida, Groote Eylandt and the remote.
Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
President, relevance. We know that history. We know the other tinkering around the edges. My question is, what is the next recommendation, Minister? Tell my people out there. Tell the country.
Senator Thorpe, your question also went to the broader issue of deaths in custody, which the minister is addressing. So the minister is being relevant to your question. Minister Watt. The minister's indicated he's finished, so first supplementary. Sorry,
thanks
Senator
for nothing. Thank you, President. There are a number of recommendations to be implemented on the federal level, Minister, such as national monitoring of the implementation of the recommendations in all jurisdictions, getting Medicare, PBS and NDIS into prisons, and raising the age of criminal responsibility. Which of these practical solutions to saving lives of those in your prisons are you currently pursuing?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Thorpe. You've mentioned that one of the recommendations of the Royal Commission relates to the age of criminal responsibility, and that is a matter that the Attorney-General is working with the State Attorneys-General on at the moment, so with his colleagues. So that is a recommendation where action is ongoing. But as I say, in the meantime, we are taking other action on other matters with our $99 million First Nations Justice Package. And that's delivered unprecedented Commonwealth investment in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander legal services to provide culturally appropriate legal assistance in coronial inquiries and also real-time reporting of deaths in custody, which was introduced in June last year. And as I say, the Attorney-General is also working closely with his state and territory colleagues on a proposal to raise the minimum age of criminal responsibility to ensure that the youngest First Nations offenders are supported to turn their lives around rather than set on a cycle of imprisonment and reoffending.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Thorpe, second supplementary.
Thanks, President. Most prisons still contain hanging points. This is basically the government facilitating the suicide of those imprisoned under inhumane conditions, which happened again on Christmas Day. When was the last time your government worked with the states and territories to finally remove hanging points?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Watt.
I'd have to take on notice the specific details about work that is going on that particular recommendation. Obviously, that is something that we would like to see continued progress on. As Senator Thorpe was aware before she left the chamber, we have been working on this matter with the states and territories. Custodial premises, jails, are run by states and territories, and that is something that we need to work with them on.
Senator Watt.
Draw that
reference.
Thank you.
Yep. Senator Payman.
Thank you, President. My question is to Minister Watt, representing the Minister for Early Childhood Education. We know that hard-working Australians are doing it tough and the cost of living is putting pressure on household budgets. We also know that women face many barriers in reaching economic equality and closing the gender pay gap, both fundamental to reaching a fairer, more prosperous and resilient economy. How are Labor's tax cuts helping workers in female-dominated industries like early childhood education sector?
Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Payman, who, along with a number of other people on this side of the chamber, has devoted a lot of her life to supporting early childhood educators. So thank you for the work that you did in that space before coming to this chamber. As we've made clear, the Albanese government's #1 priority is addressing inflation and cost of living pressures. We know that a lot of people are doing it tough through the global inflation crunch. The rising cost of living is putting increasing pressure on hard-working Australians right now, and it's particularly good that Senator Mackenzie and her colleagues have finally decided to back in our plan to provide that cost of living relief. So thank you, Senator Mackenzie, for agreeing to support our plan. Because it has been crystal clear that every taxpayer needs and deserves a meaningful tax cut. Labor's tax cuts are good for Middle Australia, they're good for women, they're good for helping with cost of living pressures, they're good for labour supply and good for the economy. Labor's tax cuts ensure that every Australian taxpayer will get a tax cut and more Australians will get a bigger tax cut. Labor's tax cuts guarantee that every working woman will get a tax cut. And Labor's tax cuts mean, on average, women will get a tax cut of $1,649 each year. Labor's tax cuts ensure that early childhood educators will be better off than under Scott Morrison's plan, because Labor's tax cuts mean that an early childhood educator earning $46,000 a year will receive an $829 tax cut, far more than they would have received under the Coalition's Stage 3 tax cuts. And Labor's tax cuts will mean an early childhood teacher earning $69,000 a year will receive a tax cut of $1,404. Real cost of living relief for the very people that serve our community, that educate our children, that probably care for a lot of the children of the people who are in this chamber, finally getting the cost of living relief that they need, and it took a Labor government to do so.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Payman, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister, for that response. Now, evidently, Australian families will benefit from Labor's tax cuts. Average income earners will now be getting more than double than under the previous government's plan. What else is the Australian government doing to provide cost of living relief for families?
Thank you, Senator Payman. Minister Watt.
Thanks again, Senator Payman. Well, as I say, Labor's tax cuts are important because we want to support the aspirations of all Australians. The Labor Party believes that all Australians have aspiration, low-income earners, middle-income earners and high-income earners. We don't see aspiration as just something that's the preserve of the wealthy in our community. Middle Australia and low-income earning Australians have aspiration as well. Labor wants people to earn more, and we want people to keep more of what they earn. These broader and better targeted tax cuts are a key part of our economic plan, which of course includes delivering real cost of living relief to Australian families through our cheaper childcare reforms. Now, Senator Payman, I don't know about you, but over the last 24 hours I've seen what is really the most humiliating backdown I have seen from the coalition in the time they've been in opposition, because of course now they say that they support Labor's tax cuts for Middle Australia. But of course when speculation first started about this, first out of the blocks as usual, Susan Lee, Ms Lee, out there saying that they would fight this legislation in the parliament. We don't even know what it would look like.
Answering has expired. Senator Payman, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. We know that having the best possible teachers and educators can transform a child's life. Why is it important that every childhood worker gets a tax cut under Labor's plan?
Thank you, Senator Payman. Minister Watt.
Well, Senator Payman, it's crystal clear, and I'm sure you'd agree, that every early childhood worker deserves a tax cut. But it's only Labor that stands up for these workers, putting more money in their pocket during a cost of living crisis. And as I say, we've seen all sorts of statements from the Liberals and the Nationals over the last couple of weeks. Here's just a few of them. Over the last couple of weeks, we've seen coalition members of parliament describe Labor's tax cut for all Australians as an egregious error, a betrayal, a trickery, absolutely shameful, class warfare, a war on aspiration, a war on hard-working Australians, lifetime tax on aspiration and Marxist economics. But yet, despite hating it that much, what are they going to do? They're now going to vote for it. In fact, Mr Dutton couldn't even allow the sittings to go for 1 minute before he was up doing a press conference yesterday in a humiliating backdown saying that he was going to back it. We know it's not the first time that the Liberals have voted for an egregious error. They did put Scott Morrison into the lodge. We know it's not the first time they've voted for betrayal, treachery and trickery. Just have a look at Senator McGrath over there in Nemesis the other night. And now Marxist economics as well.
Senator Watt. Senator Fawcett.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Defence, Senator Wong. 30,000, Minister. That's the number of Ukrainians who are killed or wounded every month in the counter-offensive against the Russian invasion. The wounded are generally driven to the hospital, often in the back of an ordinary car or truck. A delay of hours, which medical experts say significantly increases the chances of death or permanent disability. That's why the Ukrainian government needs helicopters for aeromedical evacuation and has asked Australia to donate the Taipans, which we've retired. The narrative of the Albanese government that the Taipan fleet is beyond repair was demonstrated to be inaccurate by photos published last week, which show the majority of the fleet hanging in Townsville, largely intact, and subsequently confirmed as being airworthy. Minister, why is the government so intent on digging a hole and burying these airworthy helicopters rather than helping save Ukrainian lives?
Thank you, Senator Fawcett. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President, and I think I respect Senator Fawcett's involvement and engagement, obviously, in his time in which he served the nation, and also on the Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade Committee. And I know how much he means that question with great sincerity. And he would know that we have had bipartisan support for Ukraine since Russia's illegal and immoral invasion. And you would know that in opposition the Labor Party supported the then government's position on Ukraine, and in government we have continued to provide support to Ukraine, including the training of personnel. And I think I've said in this chamber, possibly one of the most moving visits I have made has been to the location in the United Kingdom where Ukrainian troops are being trained by Australians, by British and other defence forces. And you meet people who are postal workers and farmers and clerks who are prepared to die for their country. So we share his concern about this. I'm advised in relation to the Taipans that it has obviously, that Taipan has been managed as a project of concern by the Department of Defence since 2011, that the Senator would know of the tragic crash which saw the loss of Australian lives in July, and the fact that the government announced in September of 2023 that the MRH-90 would not return to flying operations. I'm advised that Defence received a request from the Ambassador of Ukraine and that by this date the helicopters had already been subject to extensive disassembly. This decision has been communicated to the Ambassador.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Fawcett, first supplementary.
Minister, I and the Ukrainian government appreciate the support of both sides of this chamber, but the reality is Ukraine first expressed an interest in using the Taipans for casualty evacuation during a meeting that I held with them at the NATO conference in October last year, and I made sure that your government was advised of that interest before I even left Copenhagen to return to Australia. Minister, why didn't the Albanese government even bother to pick up the phone to consult the Ukrainians before deciding on a plan to just dig a hole and bury the helicopters?
The time for asking has expired. Minister Wong.
Thank you. As I understand it, on all occasions, or in relation to these matters, that the government has acted on the basis of advice from Defence. The advice I have is that the advice from Defence was clear that this was not the right platform for Ukraine, and the government and Defence made decisions, and the government on that basis.
Senator Fawcett, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. I think the Ukrainians are well placed to decide what platform will keep their soldiers alive. And Minister, now that the government has a formal request from Ukraine and it has been established that a number of the helicopters remain airworthy in Townsville, will the Albanese government reverse its decision and donate the aircraft, even in their current state, to allow Ukraine to work with its NATO partners who continue to safely operate the same type of helicopter to establish an aeromedical capability to save the lives of their people?
Thank you, Senator Fawcett. Minister Wong.
Thank you. In relation to this issue, we will continue to take advice from Defence about the best way forward in relation to this platform, but also I would make the broader point that the government continues to keep under review the nature and breadth of the assistance to Ukraine. Before I ask that further questions be placed on notice, I wonder if the Senate would indulge me. I'm pleased to inform the Senate that present in the gallery today are a number of journalists from across Southeast Asia who are visiting Australia ahead of the ASEAN-Australia Special Summit in March, and I take the opportunity to welcome them to the Senate on behalf of the government, and I'm sure by extension all of those in the chamber. Selamat datang. And I've asked that further questions be placed on notice.